Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Caitlin, and on this channel I upload all sorts of content relating to true crime, psychology and education related topics. And welcome back to another day of True Crime Week, where every day this week I'm going to be uploading a different true crime case. So if you aren't already subscribed, then make sure to do so and turn on your notifications so you know whenever I've uploaded a new video. And for today's case we're going to be discussing a slightly older case. It's a very mysterious one, and it's the death of FERDINAND TOWNER. So before we get started, I'm just going to zoom through my usual disclaimer that I like to include at the start of all my videos, just letting you guys know that I'm not claiming to be an expert in this case or any of the other cases that I cover over on my channel. I'm simply relaying the information I'm able to find myself through research of certain sources on the internet. And because only certain sources are accessible to me, it means I may get things wrong, leave things out or mispronounce things, and I apologise if I do any of those things. I'm not trying to cause anyone any harm or an injustice. I'm simply working with the information that I have available to me. So with all that being said, we shall just go ahead and get started discussing the case of FERDINAND TOWNER. FERDINAND TOWNER III was born on the 28th of July in 1910 in Philadelphia County in Pennsylvania. There is very little known or recorded about Jay's early life and his upbringing, mainly because of when this case occurred, but it is known that he did grow up in a relatively wealthy household in Philadelphia County with his parents named Jay and Elizabeth TOWNER. At some point prior to his death, Jay and his family made the move to a place called Perryman in Maryland, and around this same time, Jay started studying at Princeton University. On the evening of November the 11th, 1933, the Princeton versus Dartmouth college football game had just ended, with the victory being awarded to Princeton. Their impressive 7-0 win meant that everyone on the Princeton campus was out celebrating, and this meant that there were a lot of people out and about that evening. And a few hours after the end of the football game, Jay TOWNER III's body was discovered on a footpath in the centre of the university's campus. He was found to have suffered some internal bleeding, 2 fractured wrists and a number of other internal injuries. Now, some sources state that when he was discovered he had sadly already passed away, whilst others state that he had been alive upon discovery but had then died just a few hours later while in hospital. So for full clarity, I thought I would include both points while I was unable to determine which one was entirely accurate, and if anyone does know for certain, then please do let me know in the comments below. So despite the fact that the young man was discovered with a number of injuries, mostly internal with signs of internal bleeding, to the authorities there had been little to no indication of his death having been the result of foul play. It was considered that the injuries could have been consistent with an incident involving a moving vehicle, but things didn't quite seem to add up when they took into consideration the area in which he was found and the likelihood of someone having witnessed this in the areas in which the collision could have happened. One of the main scenarios considered early on in the investigation had been that Jay may have suffered his injuries as a result of being crushed inside the Palmer Stadium, which was where the football game had been held. They theorised that it could have been something that had occurred while a large crowd of viewers had been leaving the stadium after the end of the game, and this would have meant that it was hard for someone to notice the injured man when everyone was leaving the grounds. Now, this theory would operate on the basis that he would have been injured during the crowd leaving the ground and then would have walked to another part of the campus where he would later be found having died as a result of his injuries. And after news spread of the mysterious and upsetting death of Jay TOWNER, authorities received countless tips and sightings of things that people on the campus that evening believed could be vital to their investigation. One sighting that the witness who reported it had believed to be potentially useful had been that they had noticed a stranger had stayed at a hostel on the campus following the end of the football game. Another person had come forward and told authorities that they had seen a stranger in the car park outside the football stadium around the same time as the football game. A group of 3 Princeton students had also reported seeing again a stranger hovering in the darker areas of the campus during the game, and there wasn't really a lot reported about said stranger in terms of his appearance and anything that could potentially lead to an identification, and the police had a lot of work ahead of them to be able to try and find the identity of the unknown individual before then even being able to establish whether he had any involvement in Jay's death. And then in the same November of that year, the police had announced publicly that they could confirm of an incident occurring during the football game in which a newcomer, or a stranger as people had described him, having fallen down some of the concrete steps during the game inside the stadium. Based on all of the reports that they had received, they were able to determine that this had occurred right at one of the most interesting points during the football game when Princeton had scored a goal, and the man had risen from his seat before then falling down 5 concrete steps. He had landed onto his hands before then rising again and appearing to be perfectly fine to all of the surrounding spectators. And this sighting then raised the question of whether this newcomer had actually been J. Ferdinand Towner himself, since this incident may have been correlating with the wrist injuries that he was found to have suffered. Since there really is not a lot of information surrounding the details of this case just because of, like I said, when exactly it had taken place, I couldn't establish just how likely this was, in the sense that this stranger could have potentially been Jay himself, and just how well known Jay was on campus at the time at this point in his university life. From what I can gather, based on the descriptions of the newcomer provided by the witnesses, authorities had appeared to move forward under the impression that it had in fact been Jay, and he had not been aware of the extent of his injuries until he made his way across campus following the game. Because of this, they appeared to assume that Jay had not died as a result of foul play, and it had been just simply an unfortunate accident, but this could never be conclusively confirmed. Police at the time had received no reports of anyone being crushed against a wall in a crowd leaving the game that evening, so this just raised the question of the overall likelihood of this theoretical scenario and whether or not he could have been this newcomer that was seen falling down and, like I said, just hadn't realised the extent of his injuries. But then it also raises the question of how could a fall down some steps have led to him sustaining such extensive injuries, in particular all of the internal injuries that he suffered and the internal bleeding. It raises a lot of questions. In the month prior to Jay's death, there had been another shocking death that had occurred on the Princeton University campus. On the 9th of October 1933, a janitor at the university named John Teague was found deceased on the ground located between 2 university buildings. He was found to have suffered a fractured skull, a fractured arm, several fractured ribs, and damage done to his internal organs. And the 2 main theories considered by the authorities relating to this case had been that he could have fallen from the top of one of the buildings that he was found beside, or he was possibly hit by a vehicle. And there was no solid evidence to support either scenario other than the injuries that he had been found to have sustained, and so this too remained a mystery. Authorities had received numerous tips claiming to have seen Jay completely healthy and seemingly fine following the game. Some of them in particular placed him at being inside some of the dormitories with some of the other celebrating students, as well as in other areas around campus following the game. And so if these sightings had in fact been of Jay, it raises a lot of questions regarding the theory offered by authorities of him dying as a result of him accidentally falling during the football game and then his injuries not becoming fatal until later on in the evening. And Jay's death remained a huge mystery to all those who had been present at the football game that night. And following the death of Jay, a United States Senator named Millard Tydings had taken a particularly strong interest in the case, and he publicly chose to use this case as a means of campaigning for improved responses of campus police forces. The senator claimed that Jay's case was just one example of the many acts of crimes that go unnoticed or slip through the cracks due to them being untrained and unable to deal with such extensive or drastic cases. And the governor of New Jersey at the time had actually taken a special interest in the investigation itself, and working hand in hand with a prosecutor and the chief of detectives in Mercer County at the time, they'd used their knowledge to re-examine the case reports, and they determined that it was entirely possible for Jay's death to have either been a complete accident or a completely intentional act, and that if it was an intentional attack, he likely hadn't been the only victim. And this is when they had connected the death of John Teague, the janitor, that had occurred the month prior, and reconsidered the possibility of both of these deaths only seeming to be the result of accidents on a first glance. But aside from this, there was little else in terms of what the investigators had to work with, and both the deaths of J. Ferdinand Towner III and John Teague remain complete mysteries to this day. So I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on this case, because I think there's a lot of questions regarding, one, do you think these were complete accidents, or do you think it was likely the result of foul play, possibly by the same person? And like I said, Are they connected, or could it just simply be a coincidence? I'd love to know your thoughts down below. There definitely are a lot of contrasting opinions on this case when you start asking around, but I think it is a really fascinating one to consider and completely baffling, to be honest, that this happened so long ago. It remains a complete mystery to this day, so do let me know your thoughts down below. So that is where I'm going to end today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.